Good afternoon. Welcome to Forest Hill Cemetery. This place wasn't always a cemetery. For many years before Ashland City existed, it was a gathering place for the early settlement. At that time, it was a part of Davidson County, and the wagon road to Nashville led just beside the property. My name is Braxton Lee. I was born in 1766 in Goochland County, Virginia. This young man is my youngest grandson, Richard Peebles Lee. He was born in 1829, here on our homestead. He lost his mother when he was 6 years old, and he came to live with me until my death in 1841. He then went to live with his other grandpa, Cordy Peebles, from Bull Run. Our family settled here on the banks of the Cumberland River in December 1796. Tennessee had just become the 16th state in June, and there was a lot of chatter back in Virginia about the Cumberland settlement. The blood of many settlers and Native Americans stained the ground here for many years, but by now peace had come, and some even called it paradise. Our company of about 90 settlers left Fluvanna County, Virginia in October of that year. I led the expedition with my friends Abram Murray and Chapman White. It took 2 months to get here. We loaded everything we owned on wagons, and we traveled the Cumberland Road and the Avery Trace. My wife Annie and I settled with our 5 children just towards the river, just a stone's throw from here. The Murray and White family settled south of here in Williamson County. There in 1799, Murray laid out town lots on his 96-acre farm, and he called it Franklin. There was no city here at the time, and just a handful of other settlers. Adam Binkley family settled at Sycamore Creek. Jacob and Mary Hunter were our closest neighbors. We all became fast friends. In those days, it was important to have good friends. We worked together to clear the land, build roads, and soon we needed a ferry to cross the river. The river was the lifeblood of our community. We floated our cotton tobacco down the river to Clarksville and Nashville. It was easier to travel on the river than over these hills and primitive roads. Later, steamboats brought other visitors to visit and trade with our small but resourceful community. As you can imagine, life on the river was tough. My friend Jacob Hunter died in 1806, leaving his wife Mary with 6 children. In 1807, I was commissioned captain of the 20th Regiment of the Tennessee Militia here in Davidson County. Later that year, my wife Annie also died. We had 9 children at the time. You learn to keep going after tragedy and make the best of life. The next spring, on May 8, 1808, I married Jacob's widow Mary. The same day, her son Emmanuel married my daughter Judith. It was a double wedding. Very soon after our wedding, we decided to build our homestead just up on the hill, and it's there this very day. By the time our house was built, I had been appointed the Justice of the Peace for this area. Over the next few years, I officiated many weddings from the front lawn of my house. I'm sure some of these couples were your ancestors. Mary and I had 2 more children of our own. Richard's dad, Stephen, and a daughter named Karen. More families settled here, and when the War of 1812 started, I enumerated 60 men from our county for the militia. So many of these men and other Tennesseans volunteered that we became known as the Volunteer State. I lost a brother, Lewis Henry Lee, and a cousin, John Lee, at the Battle of New Orleans. Around this time, Brush Arbor meetings started here at Forest Hills. The Reverend Robert Heaton from the Whites Creek area was bringing the gospel to this area. These meetings were a great emotional release from the stern reality of pioneer living. As a result of these meetings, Reverend Heaton founded the Marrowbone Zion Church here in 1826. I donated 2 acres of land for the church. The log church was built, and in 1833 we had 90 members. It continued to be the centerpiece of the community until Ashland City was formed. Richard's mother was the first person buried in the shadow of the church. On January 1, 1838, a vote was taken to create a new county. We were going to call it Cumberland. The vote for the Davidson County residents took place at my house. When the vote was tallied, the county was turned down. They voted again in 1844 with the same results. Residents finally voted to create the county in 1856. Some meetings of the new county took place here at the old log church, and today it's a public cemetery. At the first county meeting, there was a call for a county seat to be placed in the center of the county. Mr. James Lennox land was chosen, a city plat was created, and Ashland City was formed. Richard was a young surveyor by that time, and in 1856 he helped lay out the city. In the same year he married Angeline Binkley, the great-granddaughter of Adam Binkley. In the 1860 census, Richard and Angeline were shown living in the new town of Ashland City with sons John and James Richard. Neither I nor he knew that his second great-grandson would one day be governor of Tennessee. The rest is 160 years of history, of which all of you are a part. Well, that's enough for now. You have a lot of other people to meet that helped make Ashland City what it is today. Enjoy your visit.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Faney Pickard, to many known as P.P. Pickard, later on referred to as Colonel P.P. Pickard. That was actually an honorary title given to many veterans because I never rose above the rank of private when I enlisted in the Army. And my battle experience led to the loss of this arm. My family is of French descent. My grandfather, Peter, came here around 1778 when General Lafayette and the French troops came to the aid of the Americans in the 13 colonies to fight for our freedom from the British. Green Pickard, his son, and my father came to Tennessee in 1825 and settled in Hickman County, where I was born in 1845, to he and Mary Chambliss Pickard as the 10th of 13 children. I enlisted at age 15 in the Confederate Army after the attack on Fort Sumter in April of 1861. I served with Captain Frank Manning in an artillery battery that fought at Fort Donelson, which is nearby the hamlet of Dover, just north of Ashland City. Unfortunately, I became a prisoner of war and spent 17 months in confinement. Later, as I moved about the country, I was wounded at the Battle of Rocky Face Ridge near Dalton, Georgia, and that's what cost me my arm. That was in May of 1864, and I was working as a sharpshooter. We took out 200 Union soldiers that day, but some might say there were some pretty good Union sharpshooters on their side as well. I was taken to a hospital in Atlanta, and upon discharge, I went to Marion, Alabama until the end of the war. Later, I served as the first president of the Association of Confederate Soldiers, the Tennessee Division, which was incorporated in 1887. I moved to Perry County after the war and married Miss Julia Britt. Her father, William O. Britt, was a prominent Tennessean, a wealthy man who had prospered as a peanut dealer and a shipper, and in fact left a rather large estate at the time of his death. One of my proudest accomplishments was in 1883 when I was elected Comptroller of the Treasury for the state of Tennessee, one of the 3 constitutional offices in our state. I was twice reelected and served under 2 governors. I was recognized for my financial efforts and my duties, which led to reducing the debt of the state of Tennessee, which had been amassed after the war. In 1900, I became a supervisor of the census for the Hermitage Congressional District. Records show that my three sons, Obed, Nixon, and Edward, were officials with me as well. Nepotism was not much of a concern back then, and as someone said, family needs jobs too. In 1901, I came to Ashland City and organized Ashland City Bank and Trust Company, serving as cashier from its inception. The first institution of its kind in Ashland City. We had an operating capital of $25,000, a surplus of $25,000, with deposits averaging $75,000. The Ashland City Bank and Trust Company contributed greatly to the prosperity of our town throughout its existence. Later, I was nominated to be Register of the United States Treasury, although I was not selected by President Woodrow Wilson. He received numerous nominations and recommendations for me from across the state of Tennessee. I was struck by illness in the last week of December in 1928 and died on January the 2nd, 1929, at the age of 83. The Reverend J.S. Rice of the Ashland City Methodist Church conducted my funeral services the next day, and my remains were laid to rest here. Among my honorary pallbearers were Hugh Dozier, the son of my close friend Enoch Dozier, and T.J. Stump. I bid you a good day.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Enoch Dozier. I bear the same name as my father, Enoch Dozier, and the same name as his father, my grandfather, who was also Enoch Dozier. And so quite naturally, I named my only son Hugh. My family was of English and French descent. My grandfather came from North Carolina in 1780 to settle in what is now Tennessee, what in those days was known as the Southwest Territory, the area south and west of the Ohio River. Now apparently I didn't inherit my grandfather's longevity, as he lived to the ripe old age of 105. I came to rest here at the more modest age of 62. My father was born in Davidson County in 1806. My mother, Judith Gupton, was born in Montgomery County. Her father, Abner Gupton, was a soldier during the Revolutionary War. Many of his descendants still live in the area today. I myself was born in what was Davidson County in 1849, but what would be Cheatham County today. I grew to manhood working on the farm and received a common school education. Eventually, I met a lovely lady by the name of Miss Betty McDaniel, daughter of Mr. and Ms. Robert McDaniel, and we were wed on April 4th, 1878. In 1881, I came to Ashland City, and the following year entered into the milling business. After about 3 years of producing flour and working in the sawmill, I gave up the milling business to pursue the mercantile business. Now, that proved to be a very wise decision. My mercantile business was located at the corner of Cumberland and Main Street. In 1904, my son Hugh became a partner, and the business became known as E. Dozier and Son. Eventually, I would turn over management of the business practically to Hugh. Having Hugh in the business now allowed me to pursue other interests in the community. I was an organizer of the Ashland City Bank and Trust Company and became vice president of the bank. Betterment of the community and public enterprise became very important to me as well. I was an early advocate for good roads and became founder of the Cheatham County Warehouse Association. Recognizing the need to educate our children, I played a key role in construction of the Cheatham County High School. In 1907, we built a two-story magnificent concrete structure up on a hill along Sycamore Street, overlooking the town. And the school had a modern air furnace with perfect ventilation, lighting, patent desks and other furniture, and a large library of books. Professor Z.A. McConico was selected as principal, assisted by Miss Josephine Link, a lady of splendid Christian character. Now, Miss Link not only had the advantage of being born of teaching stock, but she held a Bachelor of Arts degree from Vanderbilt University. I was a member of the Christian church and was a Democrat, though a conservative one. While I never was a candidate for any public office, I served as mayor of Ashland City in 1907, following its reincorporation as a town. Ashland City was first incorporated in 1859, but that charter was repealed in 1883. I was proud of our town and proud to be its mayor. In 1908, an article in the Tennessean appeared, which read, "Ashland City is a growing town of 1,000 population and bids fair to be one of the most prosperous towns in Middle Tennessee. This beautiful village nestles along the banks of the Cumberland River. Its merchants are enterprising and professional, and socially its citizens are well educated." I was still serving as mayor of Ashland City in April of 1911 when I became ill. After a short illness, I passed away on April 25th, survived by my wife and only son, Hugh. And I left behind a rather large estate. My funeral service was held on April 26th, and the business houses in town closed during my burial. I now rest peacefully here, along with several other mayors of our lovely little town. Mayor Stump, Mayor Stratton, Mayor Cowan, Mayor Roberts, Mayor Balthrop, and others. Good day, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, my name is Maria Peebles Lee, and I was born May 14, 1810, to Cordis Clifton Peebles and Elizabeth Lennox Campbell. We lived in the Bull Run community right down the road, and I was the oldest of 5 children born to this marriage. When I was 3, my father, Cordy, enlisted in the 2nd Regiment of the West Tennessee Militia under General Nathaniel Taylor's brigade. He served in the Creekside community and in Mobile and Pensacola against the Spanish. He was a drummer and a fifer. Well, I can see that you're probably wondering what a fifer is and why there were drummers at war. A fife is a small flute, and drummers and fifers were very important during the time of war. You see, they had no other means of communication, so the only way that they could warn the soldiers was using the fife and the drum. They would also use the drums and the fife to entertain the soldiers and to calm them when they needed to relax. These places where Pop was seemed so far away from Mom and me, and we wondered if he would ever even return. Finally, in the fall of 1815, Pop did return, and boy, were we excited. He played the drums and the fife a lot, and my brothers and sister and I loved to march to the drums. In January of 1828, I married Stephen Lee. He's the youngest son of Braxton and Mary Hunter Lee. A year later, we had our first son, Richard Peebles Lee, and the following year, we had our daughter, Mary Frances Lee. We were part of the church, New Charity Church, here in this grounds, and a lot of our friends and family from out back east were moving to this direction. In the fall of 1835, I got sick and I passed away. On September 15th, 184 years ago to this exact day. Less than 200 years later, I could have never imagined that my third great-grandson would become governor of this great state of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee. Boy, would I have been proud. I was the first person buried in this cemetery beside the community church.
Well, I'd like to welcome you all to Forest Hill Cemetery today. I'm John Tandy Duke. This is where I rest. My father's buried over there, John Martindale Duke, and my mother, Henrietta Duke. I was born in 1877 down at the area that's now called Henrietta. And my grandfather had a store there. In fact, my family goes way back. My ancestors were at the Jamestown settlement by 1621, and my relative that came to Tennessee, my grandfather, got a Revolutionary War land grant and settled the area up around Half Pond Creek in the late 1700s. Most of my family has lived up in the North Cheatham County area up on the Montgomery County line. My father had a store there along with his father before him. When my father, John M., went off to the Civil War, he was gone for 4 years, and when he came back, he took over the family business. John M. was in a Texas cavalry unit called the W.P. Lane Rangers. And from what I understand, they were mostly young kids chasing their horses around out in the remote outposts in Texas. But he survived the war, and his best buddy kept a diary and published it after the war. So we know what he was doing almost every day of the war. In the early 1880s, my father moved to Ashland City, and he built a store on Main Street where Stonebridge Books is now, and the Freemasons Lodge. And then he built a house over across from the courthouse. It's the building that used to be Stinnett's law practice. They had a funeral business in addition to the store. They had a shed out behind the house, the Stinnett building, where they built coffins. And my brother also had a law practice there, Phil Duke. Street over here is named for my brother Phil. So my dad passed away in 1916, but just before he died, in 1914, we built a new store building. And that's actually the building that you see there today, the brick building, the Stonebridge Books. The other one was a frame building. But we had the first elevator in town. We had to have an elevator, you see, because the embalming room and the casket display room was up on the top floor. So we had to have a rope-pulled elevator just to carry the departed up and down. So things were going pretty good. During the early 20th century, we had managed to buy up a lot of the bottom land and did a lot of farming all around under where the bridge is now, and we even had the top of Sidney's Bluff, and we used to log up there and push the logs off the bluff, and then we could float them down the river. We had to post lookouts. As you might remember that the road used to run in front of the bluff, so we used to have to post lookouts to stop the horses and the cars, when the logs would come off. So things were going really good for a while. Then the Great Depression hit, and business dropped. Things weren't looking so good for us. So we ended up selling most of the bottom land. The only thing that I managed to keep was the house on Sycamore Street where I used to live. And I would have had a little more of that, except there was about 5 acres, and I lost a corner of it in a pool game in Ashland City. But that's about the story of my life. It's fitting that I have a chance to speak here because I was a funeral director for many years, and I got to know a lot of these people. They were my friends, and I was the last one to see many of them. So in some ways, you might look at this as the city of the dead, and I'm one of the mayors.
My name is Thomas Jefferson Stump. I was born here in February of 1870. My parents are John and Vina Stump. I have an older sister, Isa Ada, 3 brothers, John, William, and Albert. So I grew up here on the banks of the Cumberland River. When I was young, I had a little sawmill, cut wood for the steamboats that came through town. Met a girl named Henrietta Dozier, married her in 1895. We had some kids. Had one kid in particular named Tommy Stump. Man, he was something else. He was a lively lad. So, ran the sawmill for a while, and then I got elected sheriff in the late 1800s. A couple of quick little stories about that. We had a guy named W.H. Lewis. He escaped the Tennessee Penitentiary. Came this way, took the ferry, came here. We got word he was coming here. So we arrested him, sent him back to the pen. That was interesting. And then some of you may know the Hagewood family. There was a guy named Gid Crane. He shot and killed Robert Hagewood, and there was a posse looking for Gid Crane. And so I knew if we didn't catch Gid before the posse did, there would be some vigilante justice for sure. So lucky for Gid, we caught him before the posse did. Otherwise, he would have had a worse day than he had. So, resigned from the sheriff. And then I opened a grocery store down on Main Street here in Ashland City. Ran that for a while, 20 plus years. And back plumbing being what it was at the time, we had a old outhouse that we'd go to from the store to the outhouse, and I got tired of cutting those weeds, and I thought there's got to be an easier way. So racked my brain and thought, so one day I found a barrel ring, and I cut a piece of that barrel ring steel, put it between 2 pieces of ash wood, put a brace on it, and used that to cut the weeds. So I had a traveling salesman came through town one day, and he saw my little contraption and thought it was neat, so he asked to buy it. So I sold it to him. Other people kind of saw it and thought it was a good idea. So I, in 1925, got a patent for it. We called it the Lively Lad, after Tommy. So we made over 500,000 of those, sold them all over the U.S., had a factory down here in Ashland City where the ball fields are now. We'd make about 100 Lively Lads a day, a crew of 15 guys. We made them out of ash wood. Ashland City is named after the ash trees, and we made so many Lively Lads, cut down so many ash trees, I think we cut all the trees down in Ashland City, all the ash trees. So anyway, so we did that for several years. I got older. Tommy was doing the business with me, and I really always wanted to move to Florida, so me and my wife Henrietta moved to Florida. And then Tommy ran the business for a while, ended up selling it to a guy named Alan Duke. Alan ran the business for a while, and then he ended up selling it to some businessmen out of Clarksville. So they ran it for a little bit longer. Technology caught up to them, so anyway, they ended up closing the business. So me and Henrietta were in Florida, lived a good long life. I died 73 years ago, buried here in 1946 with Henrietta and then my sons, and so that's my life story. So next time you think a Lively Lad, come across a Lively Lad, I hope you think of me. Thank you.
Welcome everybody, come right on over, welcome. Howdy. Well, I'm glad to see y'all today. My name is Obed Pickard, and while I'm not buried here at Forest Hill, I have a lot of roots in this cemetery. My father, P.P. Pickard, and my mother are buried over there in the corner. I think you saw P.P. earlier. Now let me introduce our little singing family here. Over to my left is Mother Pickard, my beautiful wife, the former Leela Mae Wilson of Ashland City.
We were married on Christmas Day in 1906. Over on the far left there is Obed Orlando Jr., better known as Bub. Here's my lovely daughter Ruthie. She's the best accordion player around. And my son Fanny joins us here on guitar, and he can play anything else too. Now, not with us today is our little daughter Ann. She's just learning, but she can hum and sing every tune we know. Now, sadly, there's a family member that's not with us today, and that's our oldest daughter, Leela May. 1925, a very tragic accident. Poor Fanny accidentally knocked over a .22 rifle, and it discharged and struck poor Leela in the head, and she only lasted for about an hour before she went on to see the Lord. But what I want to talk to you about today is how we got from Sycamore Street to the Grand Ole Opry to radio stations all over this country to Hollywood, California.
Oh, quit talking. Let's play 'em.
All right, Ruthie. How about one off Walking in the Parlor, cause she'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. She'll be driving 6 white horses. She'll be driving 6 white horses. She'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. Now, I told you I was going to tell you how we got on the Opry. Well, there are a couple of different stories about that. First one goes like this. According to the 1938 Tennessean article, when poor Leela May died, I was out in Virginia traveling as a salesman, and the family wanted to reach me. So they went to the radio station and asked WSM to broadcast an all call across the southeast. Obed Pickard, please come home. Well, I did that, and when I got home, I was so grateful to them that I went up to the radio station, and I wanted to thank the solemn old judge, and I saw they were having this radio show and told him I played, and he invited me to bring my instruments back, and lo and behold, the rest they say is history. Now, or is it? There's another competing story, and this is the one that Bub and Fanny would tell you. My brother Nixon was working in a bank in Nashville one day when Judge Hay happened to come in, and I was in the bank. He knew that Judge Hay was starting this radio show called a barn dance, later to be called a Grand Ole Opry, and he suggested I audition for him. Well, I told Judge Hay that I had played for Admiral Dewey during my service in the Spanish-American War, and he was sufficiently impressed. So he invited me to come back and play again, and the rest, they say, maybe is history. So by 1926 to 28, we were playing on the Opry. And because of that, in 1927, CBS Records gave me the opportunity to make my first record. Mother joined the next year, and eventually all the family joined. And over the next several decades, we made a total of 16 records in all. Well, by 1928, old Bub over there, he'd gotten a little restless. He went to Detroit to get him a job. He was working up there and doing fine. And one day Mother said, Dad, we need to get on a vacation. We need a vacation. Let's just get in the car and go. So we loaded everything up and headed up to Detroit. And by the time we got there, Bub had arranged for us to have a little show on the radio. We played on the radio station there in Detroit, made $25 a week. That led into a job over at WGNAR in Buffalo, and they signed us to a 40-week contract to play on a show called The Cabin Door. Well, things were going fine, and 1931, Mother took a little ill. We decided we better come home to Ashland City to recuperate, and came back. And so from 1931 to 1933, we had our second stint on the Grand Ole Opry. Well, we thought maybe we ought to go try this national radio thing again. We're actually the first group, you might say, that parlayed our Grand Ole Opry appearance into a wider national audience. So Judge Hay wrote us a letter of recommendation, and we took off. We wound up going to Chicago, playing on the radio. We went to Philadelphia. We went to New York City. We went to New Orleans, where they said we got over 700 pieces of mail a day. From there, we went on to San Antonio for our base of operations. And by 1940, we had wound up in Hollywood, California. Now, what did we do out there? Well, we made some B movies, appeared in some B movies. I played a character called Rocky, a stagecoach driver, in the 1940 film Frontier Vengeance. But our biggest claim to fame was by 1949, they had asked us to star in a nationwide television show. Television was just kicking off, and we were sure happy about that. So KNBH, now KNBC, put the Pickard family on national television. Well, by 1954, I'd reached the age of 80, and the good Lord decided it was time to call me home. And so I was laid to rest in Hollywood, California. The rest of the family played on a little bit through the 50s, and I want to leave you all, if I could, with a little thing that Mother and I wrote for the Pickard family songbook. And it goes like this. We owe whatever minimal success we've had to our great silent audience, but our true inspiration has been our dearly departed Leela May. We know that as long as she's in our hearts, we will never falter, never fail, and never give up. Because we know that one day we'll all be together again, playing those mountain tunes and singing those mountain tunes on that golden shore with the angels to die no more. Good day, ladies and gentlemen.
There's an old and faded picture on the wall. It's been hanging there since many years ago. It's a picture of my mother, and I know there is no other that can take the place of mother on the wall. On the wall, on the wall. How I love that dear old picture on the wall. I am sick and passing by, and I bow my head and cry. But I know I'll meet my mother